got some things functioning. Just a few, not everything. Let's not be greedy. Okay. Let me try and check on audio balance before this gosh darn stream. Makes me lose my mind. Honestly, I'm not gonna lie to you. It doesn't sound terrible. The audio doesn't sound terrible. There's like a dryer and a fan like immediately on either side of me. So that's gonna be making noise. But any other option would have been too much, honestly. Too much for me right now. I've got to get used to this because, fun fact, everything decided not to work. I was supposed to start this stream like hours ago, and everything decided not to work. My webcam decided to be a little bitch and say it doesn't want to be working on my USB hub anymore, which sucks because it barely manages to fit. Like, the cord is barely long enough to get from my desk to my computer underneath the desk, and so that's fun. So this is in a completely different spot than it usually is, but that's, you know, what we gotta do. That's what we've got to do. That wasn't working, and then I decided to switch because I'm not currently vibing with Canva because, you know, they're also perpetuating the stolen art with the AI shenanigans. So we're looking for an alternative to Canva, and at the moment, an alternative I'm looking for in terms of, because what Canva was what I was using for my little slides for these types of things, and like the stream, my book streams and whatnot. And I currently am becoming addicted slightly to this app called Miro, and that is currently what we are going to be using today for this. It's definitely very light. It's definitely very chill this time around because I made this over the past 2 nights. not even that much time dedicated to it, but I haven't been putting a ton of time into setting up what this is gonna look like. But honestly, next year I think we're gonna stick with this for at least next year, and I think we're gonna get some good stuff in here. I'm gonna be uploading all of the digital stickers I've been obsessed with for planning into this app, and it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. For right now, it's pretty chill. It's pretty minimal, but we're gonna see some changes. We're gonna see some differences coming in here soon. But the screen capture did not want to pick this up for some reason, so I had to finagle with that for a while. I don't even know what I did that made it work, but, you know, we're not gonna complain. And now I have to also, like, eventually switch over where everything on my computer is at some point, because I'm not used to it. I'm not used to the camera being here. We're working on things. We're trying to live our life. But salutations, friends. My name is Brianna C. Bond, otherwise known as Nordic Scholar, and we are here to talk about my quarter 3 and 4 reading wrap up. We're doing 3 and 4 together because I had a full psychological breakdown towards the end of quarter 3, and not only was I just not reading much, that's why I don't have a ton of books, at least not a ton of long fiction. Don't have a ton on this list, and that's fine. It happens. We got where we got. But yeah, so we're doing quarters 3 and 4 together. I don't do, in case you're new here, I don't do monthly wrap-ups because even when I'm not having full psychological breakdowns, I tend to read slow. So this is honestly probably more books than would be on a regular quarter wrap-up. But it's not many, not many more. I don't read a ton, so that just doesn't make sense to have a full reflection every month when there's 1 or 2 books to talk about. So because it's the end of the year, we'll talk about the actual wrap up. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about these books that I read this quarter. We'll talk a little bit about, I didn't share any of the like statistics that I have, because I have all of my book stuff on Storygraph. I have that, as well as I have another just spreadsheet type thing that I also keep all of my book stuff in. So I have options to show me stats. I just didn't input them again. Not a lot of time before I switched over to this thing, but maybe next year we'll look at some of the stuff. But for right now, let's go into the novels that I read this quarter. First and foremost, we can zoom in a little bit more. Let's zoom in a little bit more. The novels that I read this quarter, or this half of the year, really. First book that I read was Love Times Infinity by Lane Clark. Here we go. Description of the book. High school junior Mitchie is struggling to define who she is for her scholarship essays, her big shot at making it into Brown as a first-generation college student. The prompts would be hard for anyone, but Mitchie's been estranged from her mom since she was 7, and her concept of family has long felt murky. Enter new kid and basketball superstar Derek De La Rosa. He is very cute, very talented, and very much has an eye on Mitchie no matter how invisible she believes herself to be. When Mitchie's mother unexpectedly reaches out to make amends, and with her scholarship deadlines looming, Mitchie must choose whether to reopen old wounds or close the door on her past. And as she spends more time with Derek, she'll have to decide how much of her heart she's willing to share. Because while Mitchie may not know who she is, she's starting to realize who she wants to become. If only she can take a chance on Derek, on herself, and on her future. I loved this book. I love Derek De La Rosa. He was such a sweetheart. He's so adorable, and he's so head over heels for her from the beginning, which we love. I think as a person with a rough family situation, love seeing shitty families and stories. Something to connect to, something to make me feel like it's not just me. We love that. We need that. This is definitely a book I needed as a kid. This is definitely a book I wish I had as a kid. And, we already had lots of chats and lots of, like, the blurb of the book, and probably a lot of reviewers talking about this book focus probably a lot on the romance, because Derek is just absolutely fucking adorable. Derek is so sweet, and just their relationship as it grows is super cute. But her best friend, Joe or Jojo or something or other, did I leave a review on this book in which I listed Jojo? Her best friend in the book, so fucking cute. So there's a point in this book where Jojo gets, like, they get Mitchie presents for her birthday, and Jojo's present to Mitchie, I was bawling. I was in tears. I have not been a wreck like that in a hot minute. Oh my god. I know that moment is so undervalued by a lot of people, but it fucking destroyed me, and I urge people to read this book for that scene, because that friendship is so goddamn cute, and we love to see a good friendship, a good, strong, loving, supportive friendship in a book, and just what she did for that present. I still, I'm tearing up just thinking about it. It was so cute. I'm such a fan. I loved it. We love JoJo. Moving on, Dread Nation. I'm really not going to talk much about this one. I highly suggest checking out my stream that I did on it. But the main thing that I have with this book is that there's a lot of indigenous erasure in this book, and especially with the time period and the types of things that they're talking about, and they even bring up some specific historical situations that, like, what should have, like, it involved indigenous people a lot more than they actually did, or kind of dismiss the acts and whatnot of indigenous people in whatever historical moment they're referencing. And there's also like a big the story is all of a sudden, like towards the end of or at the end of the Civil War, like dead people start rising zombie war now. And a big thing of that is also you don't see much, if any, indigenous zombies when there should be generations upon generations of indigenous zombies everywhere. And so there's so many things with how indigenous people, as people that were actively in the area in the time of this, that were actively at war with colonizers at the time of this book, and that had been on this continent long before the colonizers got here, and long before the time of this book, that like is all explicitly erased in order to make it work. And there's also like things to be said about how the author changed the purpose of those like indigenous like re-education schools, not only to kind of prioritize Black people in a thing that really was not used. Like it was very much something they explicitly used to help with the genocide of indigenous people and indigenous culture, and to ignore all of that for the sake of centering Black people in that specific idea and into that specific context is also another thing that really I really liked the book when I read it, but having like an ounce of awareness about those issues makes it really hard for me to even think about this book anymore. So no rating, not anything else with this book. That's all I have to say about that book. The last fiction novel that I read in this half of the year really is The Final Strife by Sara Al-Arifi. Hope to God I pronounced that right. Red is the blood of the elite, of magic, of control. Blue is the blood of the poor, of workers of the resistance. Clear is the blood of the slaves, the crushed, of the invisible. Shyla dreams of growing up in the resistance, being told she would spark a revolution that would free the empire from the red-blooded ruling class's tyranny. That spark was extinguished the day she watched her family murdered before her eyes. Honor has been told she's nothing, no one, a disappointment by the only person who matters, her mother, the most powerful ruler in the empire. But when Shyla and Honor meet, a fire burns between them that can consume the kingdom and their hearts. Hassa moves through the world unseen by upper classes, so she knows what it means to be invisible. But invisibility has its uses. It can hide the most dangerous of secrets that can ignite a revolution, and when she joins forces with Shyla and Honor, together these grains of sand will become a storm. As the Empire begins a set of trials of combat and skill designed to find its new leaders, the stage is set for blood to flow, power to shift, and cities to burn. This was truly one of the best reads I had all year. I loved the world building. I just did a stream on this book, so if you want to see more about me gushing over this book, check that stream out. But trying to keep it short, I loved the world building. I loved the voice in the story. I loved the depiction of addiction in Shyla. I loved Honor. Honor very much reminds me of a character in my current story, and just the sweet, sunshiny. We love her. We love Honor. She's such a sweetheart. I loved the character arc of their relationship and how that built. I loved Hassa. I believe Merryweather. Is it Merryweather or Mayflower? God, I don't remember their name, but there's one character that dies, and it's gruesome, and it made me really sad. Why did you have to, I get it, but I'm sad. I also am so excited to see where the book goes from here, where the sequel is pre-ordered. The sequel is coming to me when it comes out. I also have I want to reread this book. I got the audiobook and the ebook for the Final Strife because I want to reread it again. I have several video ideas that I want to do on it, hopefully before, at least one of them I need to do before the sequel comes out. But yeah, I'm really excited. I loved this book. I loved everything that was given to me. I thought it was funny. I thought it was impactful. I thought it had some really, really, really great quotes, which I read in that other stream. Absolutely cannot recommend this more. So excited for this. It's a trilogy. I can't wait for all 3 books. I'm so excited. And that is it for novels that I read. Moving on, these books, like every book we're going to talk about from this point on, I didn't really talk about much. And some of them, you can probably tell why they're like literal question marks on the screen. So we got short stories and graphic novels. The first short story I read was Home, the sequel to Benti by Nydia Okorafor. And I'm not gonna lie, people didn't seem to like this one. I liked this better than the first one. And I knew I was going to, because in the in the first short story, you see her at the end talking about how she is now going to have to move on from this school and eventually interact with her family and eventually have to come to terms almost with how she left them and how they are going to view her and all of that stuff. And that is really that kind of character story is really, really something I love. So I ended up loving this more than the first one. I thought the first one was great. It didn't pull me in. This one really got me. I'm so excited to read the third one, The Night Masquerade. Like very, very excited for that. We also do like the the theme of kind of how of dehumanizing and attributing negativity to people who behave differently. Not only from people who just didn't understand why they behave differently, because in the short story you have this class of people that move with their hands and move their hands when they talk and stuff a lot. And the reason is because there is a there's a form of technology that flows through their blood that they activate. It's already in them. They activate it, and it allows them to communicate with each other, with technology around them, without having to actually talk or without having to actually physically engage with it. They can control that by moving their hands around. And you see the outside world, the majority of the outside world just doesn't get it, and so they dehumanize them, they demonize them, they make them seem undesirable and intellectually lesser and stuff like that because of this. And then you also have Benti's father, who is from these people. He knows what's going on, but he kind of jumps in with the group, and he has the same ability. He just jumps in with the group to also shame this people because he wants to follow the majority. He wants to fit in with that majority. And I thought that was a really also an interesting and really good thing to see. I have 2 question marks here. These are random short stories that I read randomly on the internet somewhere. I thought they were okay. And that's all we really need to know. Really, that's about it. And this last one was a graphic novel I picked up. It's called Sunshine by Tony Cottrell, I believe. Didn't like it. I really didn't like it. I don't know if maybe it was for... I don't know what audience it was for. It kind of read like it was supposed to be for an elementary schooler. But even if it was for an elementary schooler, I would just there are books that could have gotten the message across in a way that doesn't feel as bland and kind of cheesy, and I just didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. I also this might be a full journey that we're gonna go on. We might talk about this more next year. I struggle a lot with graphic novels. I have trouble processing images, and so I'm not sure if in general I just need to give up on graphic novels, or if maybe I need to find a type or a genre or a creator that stimulates me in a way that makes me able to kind of pick up on the images more. Because I swear, I read on this channel, we read the Kill Shakespeare. I read the first 2 of that, and I feel like I remember liking them, but it's been a while. It's been years. I think those were from, like, those are some of my first streams on this channel. And since then, the graphic novels, like, I remember liking those, but the graphic novels I read after that, I remember not really caring much about. I think I liked Civil War. Like, I think I connected with Civil War. Green Lantern was such a hard no. I think I read, like, Archie versus Predator, or Archie versus Sharknado. I read that one. Honestly, I feel like I liked that one too. I think I'm leaning towards, I just need to find something that actually does connect with me, that does stimulate my mind in a way I need. But we have that. We also had some people on Twitter giving me recommendations, so hopefully we'll find some graphic novels that we like. I also really want to read Spy Family. I really want to read it. I'm probably going to put it on, like, set up a hold for it soon, because I really want to read it, and I'm hoping I like it. But if not, I have Hulu, so I can watch the show. But yeah, so we did not like, we just didn't like that graphic novel. Little hesitant to read more Tony Cottrell in the future. We'll see what happens. There's also Wash Day Diaries is another graphic novel I really want to read. It's not available in any of my libraries, which sucks. But yeah, that's also one I want to check out. But that's short stories and graphic novels I read. Now on to the big section. It's got one more than my other, and that is nonfiction. I kind of leaned into because I think I said this earlier, like towards the end of quarter 3, I really hit like a bit of burnout, and that was a burnout for so many things, but reading ended up being included in those things. And so I ended up leaning into audiobooks, which is what these 3 are. I ended up leaning more into nonfiction audiobooks for my source of reading, and so that's what we ended up getting into. I actually read, I think, Jeanette McCurdy's book. I think I read, like, on the cusp of the burnout. And that was I'm Glad My Mom Died. This is a story talking about being abused by her mother, and how that shaped her life, and how trying to please this abusive woman shaped her life, and how she is grateful for that space that she now has from her mother that she honestly may not have ever gotten if she was still alive. If there is a memoir that I personally needed to read, it was I'm Glad My Mom Died. There are an unfortunate number of parallels in that book in my life, which, you know, always fun, but I definitely really liked reading it. Hot take. It's so weird. It was so weird when people were saying that it's a betrayal for Miranda Cosgrove and the rest of them to go back to iCarly post, like, knowing what Jeanette was going through. And it feels like someone who just doesn't understand mental health, really, because her mother forcing her into acting was a part of that abuse, and a part of what, like, harmed her. And then you also had the creator, who's probably Dan Schneider, who was an abusive man, but that, like, abuse would have gone to everyone on the set, not just Jeanette, but she also had another aspect of abuse in her life that likely didn't help. So the situation is less of they went and, like, hung back with some abuser, and more like, imagine someone got hurt, abused, bullied, etc. at your high school, and your friends went back for the graduation. The high school itself, the building itself, the set and the story of iCarly itself is not what hurt Jeanette. There are specific people that contributed to that, and those people are no longer involved. That's why And it's also like they're trying to say David Archuleta is the only loyal one because he's not going back to iCarly, and he said it's because of Jeanette. I mean, dude also wasn't a part of the show. He did not have any, like, as much of a connection as Miranda and as Nathan had to that show. So it makes sense that because he doesn't have that also personal connection to the show, he would then default to the relationship he has that is kind of in between that. But yeah, that was a weird fucking controversy I saw coming up after this book come up. Not to mention the people who can't process the idea that parents are abusive. Oh my god. But yeah, loved this book. Loved her story. Loved her storytelling, the voice of the story. She also narrated the audiobook, which was really good. I loved her narration. And she got signed for a book deal. I'm actually very intrigued to see what she ends up writing. Next nonfiction I read, Ain't I a Woman by Bell Hooks. You know, like earlier in the year. Around that time, I kind of like learned about the concept of misogynoir, and it triggered some real black anger in me. So we dove headfirst into that. We also are trying to work on reading more fat liberationist text, and so we read Fearing the Black Body. I also have, what was it I just checked out from the library? That's probably going to be one of my January reads, because like there's 2 days left in the month. I'm not going to finish it in 2 days. It's poetry, but I'm still not going to finish it in 2 days. It's Nothing Is Okay by Rachel Wiley. It like more fat positivity, fat liberationist stuff we're checking out. And then I also read last night The Asexual Manifesto by Linda Orlando, and I read that for research for a character for a book that I'm working on for my fantasy series. Yeah. Onwards. DNFs. There's technically more DNFs than are present here, but we're just not going to talk about those. DNFs. Here's the thing. Let's start with this one. I was super excited for Heron Complex, honestly. I actually really liked the voice of the story. I love the concept, but oh my fucking god. I think I made a TikTok or something about this. I think a major turnoff for me in a book is bad science rep, because this book really read like someone who did bad in like math and science classes and is bitter about it, because none of the things they're saying or complaining about or having the sciencey characters say are science. Like, you actually have the scientist characters say things you see aren't science, and like that's what an observation is. Babe, that's the first part of the scientific method, hun. Observation is the first goddamn step. This character was just treating it like if it's not something that you put in a test tube, it's not science, which is just not how science works. And I tried so hard to get past it, but the author couldn't get past it, so I couldn't get past it, so we DNF'd. I was so irritated. And then the main character was pissing me off because she was putting words in so many people's mouths, and it was super annoying. Like, there was one point in time where she had like a really shitty, like she was having a really shitty night. She had a whole like episode. She had a whole breakdown, and the science dude comes in, tries to talk to her, and then they start hooking up, and he's like, are you sure? Because I don't want to, like, I don't want to, like, take advantage of you. And she's like, oh, the big strong man thinks he's gonna hurt my little girl feelings. It's like, no. He says you're in a very emotionally vulnerable, like, point. The words he specifically says, he doesn't want you to regret it. He doesn't want to take advantage of you when you're in this vulnerable position. It has nothing to do with patriarchy. It is everything to do with consent. He wants to make sure that you are in a state in which you can actually consent to this, because you are in a high vulnerability and hypersensitive emotional state. And it was just it pissed me off, because it's literally shaming a man for wanting to make sure that you were comfortable, that you consented to having sex with him in the moment. And it was so irritating. It was so irritating. She, like, pulled up shit that had nothing to do with anything. I couldn't. I got so mad. I got so irritated. We DNF'd. I will never read any of these books. It's irritating because there's so many books that I ended up bailing on the series now, but Kindle still keeps recommending it to me. Like this, it keeps recommending me books later in the series, which I just like to say, heroine worship sounds queer as fuck, but it keeps recommending me this. It keeps recommending me one by an author that I, like, am super not okay with anymore. Like, the author gives me all of the bad vibes. But whatever, it's whatever. Moving on. The other books that I technically DNF, but we're not actually going to call it DNF. Some Bear Trials. That one was another book I was super excited for. I think I do include this on my book drafts, though. On my 5-star book drafts. Like, when I input those numbers. I'm not calling it DNF because I'm trying to still read it. But the book has just so much aggression towards, stereotypically autistic coded, like, behaviors in one of the characters. And there's so much bullying towards it that's been very jarring and just completely stops my momentum with the book. I'd like to still finish it, but at the present is going to take longer than the 2 days left in the year. So I'm just taking my time with that book and not trying to force myself when it's going to be triggering. So that's that. I am currently in the middle of Chaos by Sydney Damon, and this is technically the second time I'm reading with this book because I beta read it for her, and I'm reading the final version now. And I started it, like, I think at the beginning of my burnout, and it's just been a slow process. I'm getting more into reading. I'm back into reading fiction again, and I'm in the middle of the book. That's the only reason why I didn't finish it before the end of the year, but I'm actively reading that book. I will be finishing that book for January. Did I read it in January last year too? Now I'm curious. Did I read that book in January? I definitely think it was definitely early in the year that I finished it. Why you disappeared? Like, it was definitely early in the year. Yeah, I read it last January too. Funny. Okay. So that book's gonna be finished in January for sure. I think I'm 30-ish% of the way through, but that's fine. And the third book that is technically DNF, but we're not considering it DNF, is El Príncipe del Sol. I kind of started it. I haven't officially started it. I don't know if I'm gonna officially started it until maybe after Chaos or the next book after that, but or maybe I'll wait until after Blackathon. But I will be reading that book. I just don't know. I'm trying to decide if I want to be reading multiple books at once. We're trying to decide if I have it in me to be doing all that. Final thing to check out here is the book draft. If you don't know, I do a 5-star book draft. Started it this year. I think I want to do it again next year, even though it sucked this year. Where I just pick out the books that I think are going to be a 5-star read. Of the books that I end up reading, I average out to see what I end up rating those books and what I end up actually rating them. And despite the fact, let me look right the fuck now at all of the books I read. All the books I read. Of all the books that I read, 51% of the books I read were a 5-star read. Most of the books that I had predicted were going to be a 5-star read ended up being DNFs. So that's fun for me. We ended up with an average of 2 stars amongst all the books that I thought were going to be 5-star reads, which I think is funny and embarrassing. A bitch knows herself not even an ounce, not even a little bit. But I still want to try and do this next year. We are going to I think I'm going to do a full stream going over all the books that were on my 5-star list, talking about why I felt the way I felt about them, since most of them were not great feelings. And then we're going to go back to, we'll also talk about what my plan is for my 5-star reads next year, my 5-star drops next year. I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 books that I'm currently predicting will be 5-star reads. And if it's anything like this year, this list is going to end up at like 40 books that I think are going to be 5-star reads. I will read about 6 of them, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, talking a little bit, because the stream is getting a tish bit long. Talking a little bit about my statistics of the book of reading. I have to eventually take some time and actually add all of the books that I own to this goddamn spreadsheet, because at the moment I still don't read a lot of the books I own, which is sad. It still says I've read about 95% of the books I've owned. Granted, I do remove books that I've read that I own every year, but you know, I just keep adding more books that I own and then not reading them. Most books read in a month was February, and that was 6 books. We are proud of myself. I read primarily ebooks because I have issues with audio processing, and I have issues with nerves in my hands, so I don't like reading physical books. So that makes sense. I'm really surprised that most of the books I read were adults, because I feel like I tend to associate myself with being a YA reader, but most of the books I read were adult. I read a lot of stuff from the library, which we love. We love supporting libraries, and it has given me access to a lot of books that I never would have been able to read otherwise. I think of the statistics, because I'm surprised I read a lot of standalones instead, because the year before I read mostly random books in a series. I read mostly black authors and mostly women, which, you know, we're okay with that. Surprised that I read mostly contemporaries, and then pretty much a lot of the other genres that I read were evened out. I think the only stat that I am disappointed with is that I didn't read a lot of indie books. I read primarily traditional books. I didn't read a lot of indie or self-published books, and that is something I definitely want to fix. Like, I think looking at my 5-star picks, I have 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I have 3 indie books that I have on my 5-star book draft. I have a shit ton more indie books in my Blackathon list, which we all know a bitch may not get to those. But I definitely have a lot more indie books that especially after doing Indie Advent for Christmas, I like realizing how many of those books I was like sharing, but I hadn't actually read. I really want to get better at reading indie and self-published books this coming year. But otherwise, I'm pretty solid. I'm pretty okay with what my stats ended up being. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me at the moment. Keep an eye out. I think the next video that I'm going to do is going to be my favorite reads of 2022. That's going to be an exciting video. Lists switched up quite a bit over the year, but we'll see you then. We'll see you then. Probably next week. Hopefully next week. We'll see what happens. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and valedictions, friends.